Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're located today. Welcome to today's Scrum Pulse. We give a couple minutes here for some more folks to trickle in. Okay. All right. So today, well, I'm Lindsay Felicina here with Scrum.org. I'm going to be moderating today's session. And today I have with us a professional Scrum trainer, Edwin Dando, and also Kacper Mazek. They're from Radically Consulting, and they are here to present Beyond Agile, Building Adaptive Organizations, a great topic that we have here today. So welcome, everybody, and let's go to the next slide. Okay, so just some very quick guidelines here. So your microphones, you'll notice, are muted. However, feel free to ask questions. So in the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little box for Q&A. That's where you're going to be entering your questions for our speakers throughout the presentation. And then we will have time for Q&A at the end. So please utilize those. And there's also a chat window as well. There might be some opportunities throughout the presentation for some interaction. You'll utilize the chat for that. And also any technical questions that you have, any technical difficulties that you're having, you can put those in the chat and I can help you through that. Next slide. We are the home of Scrum, Scrum.org. We were founded in 2009 by Ken Schwaber. And our mission is to help people and teams solve complex problems. And we do so through our professional Scrum training, certification, and ongoing learning opportunities. You'll notice on our website, there are a lot of free opportunities to learn and things like this webinar to help you along your learning journey. And I hope that today's session plays an important role in that. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Edwin and Kacper, to introduce yourselves and get us started.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. My name is Edwin Dando. I am a professional Scrum trainer at Scrum.org. I've actually been involved with Scrum.org all the way since back to 2011, when I became the 8th trainer in the world to join Scrum.org, and have had the privilege of helping people and teams solve complex problems with that since. So got to work with Ken back in the days when he was really just setting Scrum.org up. I'm one of the co-founders here at Radically, and we're a company that focuses on creating high-performance adaptive organizations. We're based in New Zealand, and we work right throughout the Pacific region. A lot of the work that we find ourselves doing now is going beyond the agile type work into designing organizations for adaptability, looking at things like their operating model and how they lead and how they execute. And joining me today is my colleague, Kacper Mazek. Kacper is also a partner at Radically, and Kacper leads a lot of the strategic transformation work, and he's a lot closer to the work than I am these days. And so Kacper's going to be leading a lot of the presentation today. So Kacper, welcome along. It's great to have you here.
Hey, thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, Edwin. Hi, everyone. I'm really grateful to be here on this session. I had one webinar of this with Scrum.org 5 years ago, at the early days of Radically, our company, and us working together. So yeah, stoked to be here again. And I'm very glad to see that some of the people that I know and I'm familiar with are joining us here today. So hi to everyone that I seen and met before and worked before. So let's kick into it. Today, the presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about the change and how change works on the organizational level. What do we believe as Radically makes adaptive organization? What are the key components for us to develop modern adaptive organizations? And then I'm going to invite you into participation activity and using the chat functionality to share your thoughts of how would you go about solving some of the changes that I'm going to and challenges I'm going to share with you. So let's do agile transformation. A sentence that sometimes we might hear at the executive table or some of the leadership team, people saying, okay, let's bring the change, let's transform our organization. And with a lot of excitement, the first thing and the first step they are doing is creating this beautiful roadmap, setting the goal, direction, exciting everyone, doing cultural change, putting the new technology to manage the work, and from there on track and iterate. Of course, we need to have post-it notes, as any change requires collaboration. We are going to build agile organization. Let's do it in agile way and do it in the way how we know, so we can be a role model for change. And we are at the end, and we are very successful, right? Hopefully, that's a big hope, and that's a beautiful vision for the change journey. The reality is that we are finding a lot of difficulties on the way, and those difficulties most of the times are connected with people. And because if you think about change, any transformation, while we might think about processes or tools or operating models, at the end of the day, it's people. And we see some maybe being a little bit skeptical about what exactly we're trying to do, why we are doing that. Can you just leave me alone? I just want to do my work as I used to be. There might be some individuals that be a little bit confused. Like I can hear from the comms team and my CEO talking about change or agility, psychological safety, but what I can hear from my manager is slightly different story. So who do I trust? What is actually happening in this organization? And then you maybe had a group of people that were super excited. Even I had a few examples where people were like about to leave the organizations, but they said, okay, this change is coming. I'm excited. I'm going to stay. However, 2 years later, they don't see the promised results coming into fruition. Oh yeah, I can see, as you can see the comments, Edwin, skepticism never happens. Absolutely, that never happens. And I'll pause at this moment. I'm very encouraging any comments in the chat, and I really like interactions whenever I'm presenting some of the thoughts. So yeah, change is a hard process. Change, it's a complex program itself. And Lindsay talked about the mission of Scrum.org, helping teams and organizations solve complex problems. And change and transformation is one of the most complex piece of work we can deal with, because what we are doing, we are trying to shape and reshape how a couple of hundreds, if not thousands, of people collaborate with each other and solve problems together. And if we look at the reports and research, the data are overwhelming. Around 70% of change and transformational initiatives fail. We are not really good at it. Some of the reports suggest even 90%. Most of the data shows 60 to 75, 80% change approaches fail. And they point on different reasons why they fail. I summarized those common 3 themes across those different reports into those 3 points. The first one, culture being at odds with the desired state. So what we have at the moment in the organization is not aligned that what we want to have at the end. The behaviors that people show up, what people value, what people prioritize their time, they focus their energy on, it's not aligned to the way we want to look and feel in the future. Second point, cracks in the leadership team. And I use the word cracks here because it was represented in a different way. But at the end of the day, and from our experience, very often you might have a CEO or other organizational leaders being committed and really driving the change. However, 1 or 2 team members of the executive team might be not fully supporting, or they say that they are, but they are creating space for mid-managers or other people in the organizations that are not skeptical about the change or not wanting the change, or they feel the change is as a fear, to create an echo chamber and a space for them to be convinced and reinforce the feeling that this change is not good for us, for the organization. And the third one is lack of expertise and capabilities. Quite often is just underestimation of any transformations, any big changes, holistic changes to the system, how much effort and expertise they require. So those three are the main reasons why organizational transformations do fail. And I wanted to focus a little bit on the piece, on the culture piece. So what is culture and why it's number one? To help me talk about or explain how I see and how I perceive culture and how we work with culture, I wanted to draw a simple picture of organizational models. You know, there are different ways we can describe organization. This is one of the simple models. Any corporate is made of leadership, management, tools and processes. They have strategy and roles, people, and structure that makes it happen. And how I see organizational culture is something that brings all of those more tangible parts of the organization and work together. And the purpose of culture is to make it work and make it protect. So by culture having a mechanism that protect itself from change, what is happening whenever we are bringing change to the organization and we are saying, hey, let's bring this new process, this really new clever idea how the work can be done, we are stretching the culture that exists in the organization by moving one part that is misalignment from everything else in a little bit misalignment. We are stretching organizational culture and we are increasing the gap between individuals, people's teams, and what cultures are, again, exist for is to make things stay rather than evolve. If you think, you know, historically in the organization, outside of organizations, cultures is one of the big reasons why conflict exists, not the logic, not the intellect, but actually the culture and protecting the culture. So when we are stretching the culture, it acts like a rubber band that quite often might snap changes back. That's why we often say, you know, take 2 steps forward, 1 step backward, 2 steps forwards, 1 step backwards whenever we work through change. Because any stretch of that will result in a change, probably a less significant way when we were hoping to. So the question is how we can work with culture, how we can include the cultural aspect into the change process. And this is a good foundations for us to share before we move into building organization, adaptive organization. So culture and organizations are complex systems. And again, we talked about mission of helping complex, mission of Scrum.org having a mission of solving complex problems. I wanted to unpack a little bit what complex systems are. And here we are fortunate that complex systems theory help us to give us some answers into that. So what the complex system theory talks about, what complex systems are, it's definitely not that, not a structured plan, not a structured system that we can box out and have an org chart or process flow on or anything like that that can be just tailored and static and stays. Complex systems are systems where we have a lot of independent pieces and a lot of independent parts that do interact with each other in a very non-predictable matter and a very hard to understand from the outside way. And if you look at the theory or the definitions, what the complex systems are, according to the book, they are complex systems are built of individual components, and individual components are quite simple stuff. Those components interact with each other in a non-linear, non-predictable way, and through those interactions, those components create patterns. And the properties of the system, what the system can do, is capable of doing, is a result of the interactions between those components. So what it means is that the system, the properties of the system is not a result of individual components, but it's the result of the interactions between those components. So if you think about in nature, example, colony of ants, ant itself, very simple, basic organism. Colony as a whole has a very complex properties and complex abilities from building bridges, reaching trees, protecting itself, and doing sorts of different crazy things that none of the individual ants would be able to do or even imagine that it's capable of doing. And the same for the organizations. Not even CEO can provide you a service or an offer that organization as a whole can do. Not single individual can create value in the way how the organization as a whole can do. And it's not a summary of individual skills, it's the summary of the interactions and the patterns that exist between the people and technology that exists within the organization. Another part about complex systems that it's worth to remember is that when something happens, the cause and effect is very, very unclear. You can do something and might result with no change. Or you might do something small and it might have a triple effect, huge effect on the entire system. And the cause and effect relationship is very unclear in the complex systems. And by design, any complex environment requires approach of taking action, then inspecting and adapting, taking action, inspecting and adapting. So this is the organization, this is what complex systems are. And this theory gives us a snippet into if you want to change the system, want to build organization, change organizational constraint, where we should focus on. And the focus should not be on individual components, should be focused on the interactions of those components. And change of those interactions is the way for us to create new patterns and maybe, or change the patterns that already exist, or even remove the patterns that are not helpful with what we are trying to do. So this is really important for us. If we want to change those patterns, we need to be clear on what we are trying to achieve. What is the outcomes we are chasing for? Is the outcome is improve the quality, improve collaboration, improve psychological safety, or is it about the improved speed to market, or is it about ability to enter new market? What is the outcomes as an organization we're seeking to achieve? Is it ability to move workforce across the organization? So what are those outcomes we want to achieve as a result? Then we need to look at what are the patterns that need to start to exist in our organization that do not exist now, so we can get closer to that outcome and we can achieve that. Next step, we need to find what invest in a group of change agents, influencers in the business, in the organization, and put those change agents in the points that matter, in the points that we believe that if we do a change between those highly influential points, the chances of that change going through the organization is higher. So this is a high-level mental concept, a theoretical concept, and we're going to start slowly turning that into practice and thinking what does it mean for us when we want to develop organizations that are adaptable at scale. And yes, of course, as any complex systems, it's not a linear journey. It's about seeking what are the outcomes, what are the patterns, doing something, and reflecting after we took the action. Is it driving the change, the results we want to or not, and how do we pivot the approach? There's a really good question. I think this is a question maybe we can park till the end. I would recommend you add the question to the Q&A section so we can get back to that at the end. Now I wanted to change slightly the frame and talk a little bit about Radically and where we came from, because I think it's very important for some of the next topics I want to share. So Radically exists for the last 6 years. We are a New Zealand-based company that is driving systematic organizational changes in New Zealand and Australia. And while we are 6 years old company, myself and Edwin and another founder of the company, Dando, we know each other a little bit longer. We've been working in a space of implementing Scrum and Agile delivery years before Radically. And when Radically was born with the vision, we want to create a New Zealand in Australian organization that brings systematic change to the organization, to the workplace, where we can unlock high performance at scale. That was always our vision, always our mission. And we knew that there's a lot of answers in the Agile world, but we didn't have all those answers and experiences to be able to do that. That being our goal and our vision for the organization, we started our the first year, 2 years of Radically were all about how we can bring Agile to the mainstream and help organizations to in New Zealand and help organizations to deliver. Our big focus from day one was how we can bring this type of thinking outside of IT. IT was the space where technology projects were already embracing Scrum and Agile iterative delivery. So our focus was how we can bring it to product, how we can bring it to marketing, how we can bring it to HR, how we can bring it to the governance layer of how organizations are governed as a whole. So that was our focus. This is where we were confident in adding value to our clients, customers, and this was what our focus. But quickly we realized that there are different impediments and blockers for unlocking the performance at scale, our organizational performance. And this is where we moved to the phase, we call it Beyond Agile. The next 2 years was a space for us as Radically we built confidence and we are learning what else needs to change. What are the pieces in the operating model that needs to shift? How we grow leaders for the future? How do we assist leaders on the change journey? How do we help change the way how work is budgeted and managed and governed? So we started to explore that, and with some of the changes that we were and results we started to see, we started to build a picture of what do we believe is a framework and what we're using a way to communicate currently to our organizations of, hey, if you want to become more adaptive organization, where you want to achieve adaptability at scale, where you can move and chase new emerging possibilities, this is a few things you should do, and this is a few areas of investments. So what is adaptive organization? Adaptive organization, our short definition is one that can respond rapidly to change and thrive in less predictable environments. That's our short definition. Basically, it's organization that can deal with complexity at scale. It's the organizations that they can balance the streamline of delivery and execution, but also stepping out of the known and familiar space to explore the new and bring change to the organization at ease. And through the work, we coined what we started to develop is a framework that we use to help drive our changes and work with our clients. Those 4 elements of adaptive organizations that we are using when we drive change are: first one, it's better delivery. We call it better delivery, and we see more and more often what's on the top of the executive mind is they say, we believe in our strategy. We believe that we know what we are doing from the strategic point of view. What we are struggle with is execution. We are stuck in bringing the strategy to life. That's what our customers are saying. If you're reading about what's on top of the CEO's mind, this is a pattern of what we can see. So we want to, whatever we are doing, we want to anchor in that, and we're saying that enabling delivery is the first thing and the critical path for us to succeed and for the organization to for any change to be successful. We can't forget about that.
And Kacper, just to jump in at this point, it's probably interesting for our attendees to understand today that doesn't always mean agile, right? There's sometimes for us, better delivery is just looking at how is the work delivered and what are different patterns or approaches that we can borrow that might solve particular problems. It's not necessarily taking a known framework and saying you need to do this. Sometimes it's finding patterns that can improve existing pieces of work in a relatively traditional sense, as well as a very modern agile sense.
That's absolutely right. And what we are finding in what's the goal of us working with organizations to develop multiple, I would call it muscles or delivery muscles. Think about you being an individual. If you have all your muscles parts in the body equally developed, your ability to do multiple tasks is greater than, let's say, you just go to the gym and work on the biceps or only on chest or only on legs. To be a fully well-formed individual that can thrive in multiple environments. It's about growing a set of muscles, and then knowing how to use those and create awareness in your body or organization, the system, how to bridge waterfall with Agile, with Scrum, when we should use one, when we should do another, and when is the place to combine different methods and practices, and how we can go about that. The second part of our focus and area where we are really, really investing in is the human leadership. And to bridge the delivering human leadership, we know that complexity of organization is only increasing. And it is familiar to this group in this audience that with more complexity, more work is delivered through smaller independent teams. Much more work is decentralized. The organization tends to be decoupled to smaller pieces, smaller independent parts that collaborate with each other. And the leadership is what can make it and unlock it and happen at scale. It's here our focus on two levels. One is we are helping leaders, existing leaders in organizations, on how they can lead change differently and how they can grow what we call humanity in the workplace. So better delivery, we focus on the process, on the tools, on how to do it. And leadership is all about how do we cultivate the human part of the work environment, how we can grow trust, empowerment. The second part on human leadership is how do we redefine our organization see leadership, that it's not about hierarchy, not about where you are in the organization, but it's about how every individual can show up at work. If you think about those small independent teams, the amount of leaders we need in the organization is very, very different. If you look at the Scrum framework, it talks about leadership roles. As product owner, it's a leadership role. Scrum Master is a leadership role. And in a delivery team, in a whole Scrum team, you need way more leaders than just those two that will take lead for a different parts of the problem. And those leaders need to know when to lead and when to follow, and when to lead and when to follow. And that's the reimagining of the leadership as a concept is very important for us. The next part, purposeful strategy. It's, as I've mentioned, strategy. More and more our leaders that we work with are clear or confident about the strategy, but there's important part of it. How do we translate that to people? How do we align team and connect teams closer to the strategy? And how do we present strategy in a way that can be understood as a form of a choices that everyone can interpret and make for themselves? Another part is, it's with the changes that are happening, how do we bring more purpose to work? And people are looking for more from workplaces than just paychecks and nice culture. They actually want to understand how their work is making impact. And the fourth area of investments and focus and attention is the operating model, is the wiring of the organization. How do we enable organization to change as the context is changing, rather than to be resistant to change, or rather than working against the change and against of what's happening around the organization. So how do we rewire, create process and structures in the organization so the organization itself allows people to move around, organization itself allow people to, if we want to be more T-shaped organizations, how do we frame our job titles? If we want to have more adaptability as a whole system, how do we enable that on a systematic level? So those are the four areas where we are, all of our change and all our conversations with the organizations that we are leading are anchored in one of those 4 points. And whenever we work through the change, we are trying to make sure that we align both what is the change that needs to happen in each of those areas, and then which of those areas we should start with. It's very hard to do everything together. As a complex system, you start somewhere, you see what kind of results it creates, you move to another area. But we need to think about the system as a whole all the time. Edwin, anything you would like to add to this from your point of view?
I think the interesting thing is, as Kacper said, no matter which one of these you start in, you very quickly find that you need to start touching one of the others. So, for example, in our early days, we would be engaged around better delivery, and it might be, hey, we've got 7 or 8 agile teams here going well, but they're not reaching their full potential. Could you come in and really help them? And very quickly, as you start to get into the work, you discover links to, hey, your operating model is not really set up in a way that it is really getting the most out of that better delivery. And we need to make some fundamental changes to how we say fund and govern work, or the way that we've chosen to structure ourselves. So very quickly we hit those constraints. Or it might be, hey, you're leading in a very, very traditional way, and there might be 1 or 2 leaders that are like significantly overstretched, when there's actually been more leadership needed as we decentralize. And so we typically find, like, no matter which one of these 4 we started, it very quickly means that there starts to become links to the others. Yeah, that's what I'd add, Kacper.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So for us to have this conversation in a little bit more structured way with our executive teams that we are working with, we've created organizational assessments where we took those 4 areas and we broke them into 10 questions or areas of assessments. And for each of those areas, 10 areas, we have 4 statements on the scale from more static organization, less adaptive, to more adaptive. And we are using this assessment with the teams to say, hey, what is your current state? What are the patterns in the organization, in the system you see now? And what are the patterns we should create and we should get to? So it's a way of us to really talking about what do we want to see in the future of the organization? What are the patterns we believe we need to get to that will unlock the potential that is required for this organization, for this context? So I'll go give you the overview of those. So let's start with the bottom, better delivery. And let's look at maybe the first from the bottom, delivery execution. On the left-hand side, we have a pattern that the work is delivered through like predictive and control type of approach with strict checks. And then on the forehand side, on the other side, you have mastery of all delivery approaches chosen based on the context. And something in the middle, you have some of the iterative planning and iterative delivery with ability to respond to emerging needs. So this is the example of, we are asking them, what are the dominant patterns you see in the organization? Where are you now? Where you would like to be as the organizational capability would grow? In human leadership, let's again look at the leadership style, maybe the one on the top. On the left-hand side, you have command and control, instructional focus. The way how leaders tend to lead is through instructions. Somewhere in the middle, you have they set accountabilities, or they give direction and enable empowerment. On the other scale for the leadership style, we have a pattern that is called that we define as shared space for ownership, the self-management focus, where people come together, make choices, self-manage, work through what and why needs to be done, make decisions, and execute on those. So again, different behavioral patterns, organizational patterns that we can see or not in the organization. Resilient operating model. And let's look at the organizational structure. On the left-hand side, strict division of departments at work. Somewhere in the middle, we have cross-functional value delivery teams through ad hoc collaboration, or maybe there is a matrix structure in place that enables that. And then on the right-hand side, we have evolving structure that adapts to context regularly. So again, what is the pattern that we believe? What is how much of adaptability is needed on the organizational level? Do you think the matrix cross-functional delivery is enough? Or do we think that the context is changing so often that we need to allow for the organizational design to evolve frequently? And then purposeful strategy. Let's look at the top one, left-hand side. We have opportunistic goals set without greater purpose. And then on the other scale, we have purpose that is enabling and values that guide daily decisions. And then in the middle, we have some defined purposes, but maybe they are not lived, or they are shared, but they don't actually are embedded in day-to-day life of people and individuals. So this is Edwin. I would like you, maybe you're running very often those workshops with the executive teams. Any insights that you have from the workshop and session that you run using this tool?
Yeah, one of the so we typically the way we go about this is we'd break up an executive workshop into groups of say 2 or 3, and we get them to work through these and determine where do they see the current state and mark that one, and then where do they see the desired state of where the organization needs to be successful in the next 5 to 10 years. And one of the things that we constantly have to stress with them is, like, further right isn't necessarily the best. Like, it's good to be adaptive, but they don't always need to be gunning for column 4. Sometimes column 2 or 3 might be sufficient. It's really around what is fit for purpose for their current situation around what they want to achieve. So, for example, if it was an organization that was maybe, say, a monopoly, like a government department, or if it was an organization that had to have a very strong strategic delivery execution focus, then going all the way to being like really a little bit more to the right is probably not as appropriate. So it's, as Kacper said, like we try to get them to identify what are the patterns you see in the current state, and based on your understanding, what do you think they would be like for it to be better? And then we look at that delta. And typically what we would get in a lot of our clients is most of them would be a blend of the column 1 on the left and 2. And they typically want some sort of combination of columns 2, 3, and 4. And once we do that, we can start to get a sense of some of the key patterns that are going to need to shift for us to successfully transform and change this organization. It creates some interesting debates when you get leaders come back and they all want to sort of, one of the patterns we often see is CEOs tend to score more to the right, and often the rest
more,
of the,
more to the right on the purpose, values, and strategy, because this is the
Exactly.
accountability. So they want, CEOs often say, like, this part is good.
That's right. And then a lot of the rest of the executive team who are maybe a bit closer to the work are actually a little bit more to the left, going, oh, I think we're quite command and control, and I think we're quite quite detailed and structured, actually. So and there's some really healthy debate normally in those exec workshops.
And another interesting thing, we've done it 2 times where we asked direct reports of the executive team to do the same activity, and usually the direct reports, so the tier 3 in the hierarchy of the organization, score everything lower than the executive team.
So
by
lower, you mean more left, more to the left?
More left, yeah, not lower, more to the left.
So it's really interesting, like we've done that with executive groups, then taken further out in the organization completely independently. We've got them to do it, and it's quite interesting when you bring the data together and look at how these score.
So now I would like us to imagine that we are here, everyone on this call, on this webinar, executive team of organization. And before getting there, I forgot about this one slide. How we are using this, we already talked about, we mentioned that we are using that, following the process that I talked about, use the assessment, define what are the 3 to 6 months change outcomes we want to define using the assessment. And then we are looking at what are the influential points we want to tackle first. And we are creating a small work plan and set of bets and working through that together. So going back to what I said, let's imagine we are the executive team here on the call of the organization. It's an imaginary organization that might be based on the real scenarios and real events, but might not. Let's imagine we are executive team of the IntraBuild. IntraBuild is a large organization in the construction and infrastructure business. They operate in a regulated industry that is undergoing significant changes. Driven by these changes, they know that they need to be a different organization in the future. I'm going to show you some more details about this organization. I'm going to give you 1 minute to read through those details. And then I would like us to think about where we think, what would be the first things we think we would like to achieve, and where we would like to focus on first, and where next. And I'll ask you to do something, you can use the chat. For now, just please read the remaining part of the context of intra build, and I'll give you 45 seconds to 1 minute. Okay. I'll just reinforce a few points. The intra-build operate in a regulated industry. They realize that as regulations and industry is changing, they need to become different organization in the future. They have probably 2-3 years to get there. What they know is that they need to build new expertise in new areas that does not exist currently. And historically, they've been an organization that exists for 15 years. They have very deep but quite narrow expertise in the organization as a main pattern. So if you think about like T-shaping exists, it's very, very little of T-shaping type of individuals in the organization. And some of the most influential leaders been there from early days in the company. They have strong teams that stand behind them, but also the executive team knows and see that they need to have a new mindset. They need to start changing, shaping the culture of the organization. They need to learn new behaviors. As those changes are coming, they realize that they are stuck and they really struggle to execute on some of their top priorities. So they need to approach delivery in a different way, using more iterative, more closer to customer methods of delivering the work. Pockets of IT have experience in agile delivery methods, but not everywhere. And yeah, the most important part, executive team members of intra-build have different views on how the organization should operate in the future. So that's the context. Then the organization intra-build did the assessment, and they assess themselves being on the middle left, and the majority they want to move to middle right. The extremes that they want to go to the more adaptive areas are the purpose space. They want to have to enabling purpose and values that guide people daily decisions. In the mindset space, they know that the ability to learn and have a learning organization is critical. So they want to make it as a part of the core culture. And in the delivery, they want to have a mastery of all delivery approaches, choose it based on the context. So they want to really grow in the iterative delivery. They need and want to have some strong traditional waterfall type of delivery, and maybe some delivery methods that are bringing those two worlds together. So that's the organization. And I would like you now ask you, everyone in the chat, if you think about the first 6 months, first 180 days with this context, you're advisor to the executive team, what would you recommend the change to happen? And Jules, you asked this question, in our experience, which of those 4 areas do you think is the most influential? So I'm asking you back now, in this context, what would you do? And what others would do. Take a minute to think, write in the chat. I'm curious to hear the answers. Where would you put your first effort, and why? If there will be no answers, I'll ask you, Edwin, what would you do? So you are my backup person. We have Kimi that share that maybe the human leadership should be the first area to start investing in and doing change. Jules, enabling purpose and values as we need to create those foundations. Yeah. Vivek, work on leadership. I'll wait a few more seconds for one or two more perspectives and then move on. Leadership collaboration. Cross-functional prioritization. So the cross-functional prioritization is in the better leader delivery. Yeah. Pilot in the parts of the organization with the pain points are maybe not too big or too many to challenge. Many times leaders want to change, but they resist to it themselves. It's great comments. I'm really grateful to see that. Probably the point, the main point I wanted to make is that it's very hard to know what is the right answer in any change, because as I talked earlier, organizations are complex systems, and it's very hard to know what is the right first step. I can share what we've done in this context for this imaginary organization. The scenarios that we went through is we actually started with the better delivery. What we did there, but someone mentioned here pilot in the part of the organization. We actually did a bit because there was big urgency. We did we asked the leadership team. So we did those two approaches. Selena mentioned cross-functional prioritization. So we started with asking what are the top 5 organizational priorities? What are the top 5 the most important things you need to do in the next year? And out of those top 5, we've selected 4. So we said, hey, we want to use those four because they were suitable. One had some challenges. 4 out of those 5 top priorities. We took those priorities and we said, hey, we are going to deliver those pieces of work in a very different way. And why we went for the top priorities, and because you usually have the leadership focus, you have the leadership attention. Your top talent is going to be engaged in those priorities. You're going to touch the most influential points of the organization. So we started with the prioritization, and then we created programs of work around that, focus on delivering that work using new methods, new style, and guiding leaders that are accountable for that in a new way of doing that work. We didn't start with the leadership, we didn't start with strategy first, and the reason is that leaders, executive team members had different view on what is the right solution and what is the right approach moving forward, and trying to align them, teach them, go through the personal growth was very challenging setup, and we would be probably setting up ourselves for failure. So we said, we're going to work with your people to do the work differently, and you're going to experience, and we'll ask you to change some of the stuff that you do, and we'll ask your people to show up to work differently. And let's use it as a learning vehicle, and every 2 weeks come together and not only review how we're doing the work, but actually ask people what are the changes that they're observing in themselves and in the system as a whole as a result of the change. So we wrap the change program around it and use those pilots to deliver work differently.
And I think this goes to Vivek's point here about many times leaders want to change, but they're resistant to it inwardly. That's what we saw there, right, Kacper? Like,
yes,
we looked at it and said, you know, some of the ways that this organization's behaving at the moment are being driven from its leadership. Why would the leaders want to change? And just asking them for change for the sake of it, without any visibility or transparency around what a different organization would look like, it's just not going to be successful. And so through better delivery and them actually experiencing what a different way of delivering work looks like and feels like, as leaders, all of a sudden, they've got something that they can anchor their own change journey in, and they can look at it and go, okay, cool. I understand now why, as a leader, I'd want to change. What's important about that? I can see now that this new way of working is really effective. It's collaborative. People participate. They're happy. And therefore, there's benefits for me as a leader in changing my style to enable that. Whereas beforehand, you're just kind of asking them to change and they're less likely to. But when there's something tangible that they've witnessed for them to anchor a change in, it's much more powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was our main focus, and we stayed in this phase probably for like those big cycles. So it was, I think, 6 months, the first cycle, and then 3 months, another one. What started to emerge that they want to shift to a new operating model, and they want to articulate a strategy better that will guide them for the next journey of the organization. And that was our sequencing. Because they wanted to move to the operating model faster, but because of some other changes that were happening, they decided to park it and said, hey, let's prepare ourselves by investing in our leaders and then move to the new operating model.
And some of this did run in parallel, right? It wasn't perfectly like sequential like this.
Absolutely. The other, and just to contrast, another of our clients started completely different way, because one of the bigger pain points was lack of clarity on the accountability levels amongst the executive team and the way how decisions are made. That was the pain number one. So we needed to start with the operating model and strategy, and then we moved to other parts. And wanted to contrast those two scenarios, mostly because wanted to say two things. All areas are interconnected, and there's no one approach. It's really, really, really important to point number 3. The business environment needs to drive change priorities. We need to understand what is the context and create a change journey that is fit for purpose for the context and priorities of the business. We need to find the right pace. We need to have change agents on all levels. We want to go fast, but not too fast to break people, but we don't want to go too slow that people feel that nothing is changing, and we're not stretching and not maintaining the pace, because it's very easy to get to the cynicism, skeptical, fatigue space very, very quickly. Number 5 lesson: change is complex problem. Let's treat it like that. Let's use iterative framework and approaches to drive change. Maybe our release cycles and iterations are not every week or every 2 weeks, like in some modern software development. It's more our quarterly 6-month cycles, because that's how it might change to evolve organizational patterns. But we need to have a hard stop and do a inspection and adaptation of our plan every quarter, every 2 quarters, to successfully drive assist organizational change like that. And the last point, like, it does require bravery for the leaders to say, I don't know what is the answer, but I'm committed to the vision, and I'm asking you guys to follow me, to trust me, and sometimes to push people through tough decisions. So having the brave leaders is very, very important for success of any change. Yeah, we'll finish off with the quote, and we have 5 minutes for the Q&A. Quote: never doubt that small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So yeah, I'm really grateful to be part of this community, because I think we all believe that in change, and we are the change agents that we need to have. Thank you. Connect with us on LinkedIn. We share a lot of content with Edwin and myself. We organize different events, and we love to connect and chat to you offline. And I'll ask Lindsay to guide us through questions.
Yeah, and thank you so much. That was really fascinating, walking through all of that. So there was a question that came in earlier on in the session. Would you recommend a formal organizational change management group within a company?
Edwin, do you have maybe some perspective on that, or?
I think like a really solid understanding of change is definitely useful, and experience in going through change. So yes, I think there's definitely benefit in that. But that said, we sort of take the view in Radically that a small group of committed people working in a transparent, high-performing, psychologically safe team, and that team is normally a blend of us and our clients, like in the trenches together, can kind of figure and iterate our way through any situation, including how we go about managing change. But then that said, when those people in that group do have a background in some sort of formal or structured change management approach, there's without a doubt there's benefit in that.
Yeah. I would say there are tools from the change management that we are using all the time. Probably a little bit more of those change, not like ATCAR, not those formal structure, but all change tools that help us to assess what is the change readiness, what are the behavioral changes we can see on which level of the organization, which department, what then therefore we need to do. Because it's not like a system release, it's about measuring what's happening and how do we adapt. And I think measuring the impact of change is so important, and measuring how behaviors are changing is so important for us. Yeah, and our recommendation is always, we often create like a group or a team within company that drives the change, but we make it very cross-functional. We inject leaders in, we inject change experts, HR professionals, L&D, coaches, consultants, executive, one or two members of executive. So it's truly an organized cross-functional team, cross-departments team and levels that looks about, okay, what's happening, how the patterns are changing.
That makes a lot of sense. That's great advice. This question here, how do we help leaders overcome the fear of losing control when moving toward a more agile way of working?
I mean, my initial reaction to that is that sort of whole model, like the scenario with intragroup when we went with the better delivery, we took a sort of a pilot's approach. So we took some significant pieces of work. So we're fans of a pilot being something meaty, not something trivial. So we took a serious piece of work, ran that in a completely new and different way with a executive level sponsor across that piece of work. And I think by using the nature of iterations, we're able to show results quickly and give them more ability to steer and guide that work. And through that, we built trust and confidence. And I mean, if you think about it, like if you've worked your way to a senior level in an organization and someone comes along and says, hey, you should change, you should do this thing completely differently because, you know, it's the latest thing and it's cool and it's my advice. Like, you know, there's a lot of skin in the game from that leader, but there's less from the consultant. You know, for the leader, it could be, you know, their career, their children's schooling, their home. You know, it's serious. And so you have to be able to empathize and put yourself in their shoes and demonstrate trust and build trust very, very early. So to me, starting with that level of pilot is absolutely key. And I think over our 6 years at Radically, we've only ever had one major transformation where right at the beginning, the client's like, I want to do a transformation. Let's just transform the whole thing. It nearly always starts with us coming in and dealing with one of those 4 areas, building trust. They learn, they see and experience a different type of organization. And then they go, oh my gosh, I can see what we could be now. And that's when you really get the buy-in to change. So yeah, I think the short summary is you got to earn trust rather than ask them just to leap in.
Okay. Awesome. So we are at our time. We did have a last minute question or two that did come in. What we'll do is we'll make sure that we share that with Kacper and Edwin, and they will answer those questions offline. But we will make sure that we get those addressed. So thank you all so much. I think there were some closing slides, were there? If not,
Yes.
that's okay. Okay. Yeah, so stay connected with Scrum.org and be sure to visit the learning paths on the Scrum.org website, and you can go to the last slide and stay connected to us through our social media and webinars like this one. And thank you so much, Edwin and Kacper, for taking the time to walk us through this today. This is really, really great information. change isn't easy for many people. So thank you so much for walking us through this really great content. Are there any final words you want to leave the audience with?
No, just be brave, be courageous, and give it a go.
Be brave, build communities of like-minded people, and grow those communities. This is what the world needs.
Awesome. All right. Thank you both so much. And thank you, audience, for joining us today. Scrum
Thank
on.
you.
Thank you.